Good afternoon, everyone. Long time no see. Haven't talked to you all in probably like 2 weeks, I guess. Has it been 2 weeks? How long's it been? It's been really the third? Oh my god! It's been like 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks maybe. Unless I'm crazy. Um, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all doing well in lockdown. If anyone's in Sydney, you might have heard. Uh, well, if you're watching the recording, you've probably heard by now about the 9 p.m. curfews throughout, all those LGAs. So hope everyone's staying sane and staying safe and all of that. Today's little revision lecture is, um, I did a similar one for another course, and a lot of it's just probably going to be chatting in the sense that, uh, because we kind of have all these lectures on these different topics, it's not like it's not really a space where it makes sense to kind of be like, let's do the same thing again, but rather let's just talk about the exam. Let's talk about content and questions. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like this is similar to the exam lecture. It's just that um, I like to do another lecture closer to the exam because by now most people have kind of studied or looked at the sample exam or looked at the content, and they've kind of got questions and kind of just want some direction or this and that. I will do a quick cursory look through the content to give you some tips and tricks about what is relevant and what is not relevant in terms of your study for the exam, though largely speaking most things are pretty relevant. So I think the first thing I want to kind of reiterate is, so the final exam has been written. And I wrote it, I don't know, what day is it today? It's Friday, right? I wrote it Tuesday, something like that, Monday, can't remember. And we're getting tutors to sit it right now. We've already had one person do it. And then we have another couple of people doing it. Now, I've intentionally tried to make this exam quite as easy as it can be. And it follows a very similar structure. So what I would say is that I think for the exam, question 1 is probably about as difficult as it is in the sample exam. Question 2 is probably a tiny bit easier in the final exam than the sample exam. I think some other comments I'll share with people are that, you're probably going to find question 2, maybe let me rephrase, because I don't want to make blanket statements. The final exam mirrors the sample exam very heavily in the sense that question 1 is a depth question, question 2 is a breadth question. So if you struggle with problem solving, you will find question 1 harder. Like, this stack calculator thing is a really simple question. It's like implement a function that takes in stuff and does stuff. And again, it's not super C++ like. Like, you could do a lot of this with C style syntax. You could answer this question with mostly what you learned in the first week or two of the course. What you've learned in C++ might make it easier to do stuff, particularly a lot of the STL containers and algorithms and probably just that stuff mainly. So this here is question 1 again is really a question that just gives you like a bit of a de-stressor that you don't have to get caught up on all the language features and you can just focus on using the language, a lot like assignment 1 and word ladder. Yeah, so that's why we've talked about this before. Question 2 is the opposite, just as a reminder for people, and what that means is that for question 2, you will not find it particularly hard to solve. Like, most of the challenges you face will be in using C++ correctly. It's an assignment 2 style question. I use the word style because, it's not quite assignment 2 because we learned other things, but like assignment 2, you will feel like you very quickly understand what you have to do. You just don't quite know, you just don't quite know maybe how to do it. You're like, oh, how does how does this work with, depending on what's in, it's like templates or exceptions or inheritance or operator overloading or destructors or constructors. Like, it's more like that. So the purpose again of this exam is that people who feel comfortable with breadth topics or depth topics both have a chance to exercise their minds a bit, though both questions are extremely digestible by the average student. The first tutor who sat the exam, Nathaniel, he told me yesterday that it took him 60 minutes to finish the exam. I will preface that he's a genius, so I don't know how much that means. But if it's taking him an hour to do a 3-hour exam and he's comfortably doing it in that time, then I would be confident that we're getting on the money. But we got more people sitting it. We got more people sitting it over the next couple of days. I think I just want to preface too about the final exam is that question 1, which is our depth question, we're not going to be able to describe to you an extensive marking criteria, in the sense that it's very hard to be like, you get a point for doing this and a point for doing this and a point for doing this and a point for doing this. And in fact, it's a little bit different to this question. It's going to be a lot more similar to word ladder, where it's like you just have to implement it, and when we test it, we just test it with a whole range of word ladders, and most students get easily half of them, and then it kind of tapers off towards the end, right? So it's like, before anyone kind of asks about a question 1, like, what's the mark breakdown? It's like, well, I give you a little bit of a mark breakdown in the final exam, but it's kind of just like, it's like word ladder. It's just, we've asked you to complete a function, you complete the function, and then we test it with a range of inputs. And the inputs get progressively harder, just like word ladder. It's like, well, you can find a word ladder from cat to bat, and then you can find a word ladder from, from mat to can, and then it gets, all the way up to Atlas's cabaret. I don't know how to pronounce that word. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. We will release your spec again, your the exam the way you actually do the code. We will release that probably during the day before the exam. I haven't decided what that looks like yet in terms of, I don't know how much of the stub code gives things away. So either, like, a bunch of things could happen. We're going to either just give you a repo at least half an hour out, or we're going to create your repo like an hour out, but like not push the code yet. So we'll like push more code, or we'll have to figure it out, and I don't know. But the point is that that half an hour before the exam, or maybe I should give you a specific time and stick to it. At least 15 minutes, no less than 15 minutes before the exam will you get access to your actual exam repo, where you can open up VLab and open up VS Code. And before people worry about configuration issues, I just want to remind you that the final exam was literally, I took the sample exam Git repo and I literally copied it and changed the questions. So if you're worried about it getting set up correctly, it's like, if you can get the sample exam set up fine, if you can clone the sample exam, open it and use it, you will have no problems with the final exam. Okay? Like the final exam, we give you some basic, like the sample exam, in the final exam, we will give, oh my God, that was the final exam. Not that you could see anything anyway. Wrong repo. I should really just make sure that thing is actually private. Pretty sure I made it private. I'm pretty sure all repos on GitLab are private, but now that we've talked about it, I gotta double check. Yes, good. Big brain. Yeah, so with the sample exam, as you know, what happens is that we have this test directory, and the test directory has a really simple test in it for question 1 and question 2. The same thing will happen in terms of when remember how in the spec I say that we have this check command, 6771 exam check. Um, this will literally just compile your tests, I believe. Either test one or your tests. I can't remember the behavior off the top of my head, but all this does is compile and run the tests on the CSE machine. And that's useful, and I would recommend that my advice to you is to probably not worry about this command until about an hour into the exam. Um, Pretty sure it runs all the tests, actually, to be honest. Most of you won't be writing tests in this. I'm aware of that reality. So just for those who want to write extensive tests, who are like guns and want to write extensive tests, just be aware that exam check will actually compile all the tests in your folder. Like, it's a run all the tests. So if you that'll be slower. So if you want that to be a quicker check, then I'd suggest you comment them out when you run it. It's just a simple command. So if you can run this command and your code works, that is an extremely high guarantee that you'll at least get some marks for the questions. Because obviously more complex tests we write might cause your code to not compile, particularly for question 2. But you should kind of rest easy if that command works. Just a heads up for people too, I'm going to move this command over to the final exam about an hour before the exam. We use the same command. It's just I change what exam it deals with. So about an hour before the exam, this command won't work for you on the sample exam. That's fine. None of you, I doubt any of you are going to be super running this, but that's just a heads up. Dean says, sorry if this is already answered, but we don't need to write any tests in the exam like in the assignment, right? Correct. You don't need to write tests. We don't mark style. As I said to everyone, I'm not looking at your code. We can't look at that much code and debug it. As I've said to people before, the 2 cases I will look at people's code are cases where you get 0 in the exam, or you have failed the course by, like a soft margin. Like if there's someone who got like 80% in assignment 1, 80% in assignment 2, 80% in assignment 3, then and then you get like 0 in the exam and you get like a 48 in the course. We'll look at that. As I said to people before, it's like you're not going to fail the course on a technicality. I want to make clear, some people do fail this course because their code doesn't compile in the exam, but it's like the difference is when you look at that code, you think that was never going to compile. Like, it's like there's just literally 100 syntax errors. People who can't compile basic code because it's riddled with errors everywhere, we can't do anything about that. That just means you haven't demonstrated you're comfortable programming. But it's like, if someone, we see this all the time, right? Like in assignment 2, right? We had tons of people who wrote dimension instead of dimensions, or the other way around. And we're never going to fail anyone because they missed out on half the exam marks because they misspelled a prototype. Right, misspelling a prototype could tank all you know what I mean? So that's the kind of case there. Anyone who gets 0 for the exam as well, we'll look at. Depending on how it goes, we might look at people that get 0 for question 2, maybe. But it's really just we have to draw a line somewhere. Naturally, students know as well, and we'll release the marks to you in the end anyway. So. Don't worry about me checking it. That'll be very commonsensical. Worry about just doing your job right, if that makes sense. Like, just get focus on getting comfortable writing code that compiles. Because I know there's some people in this course that kind of when they deal with the assignments, it's like you just write tons of code and then you spend hours and hours like debugging it and getting it compiling, and it's like that approach won't help you in the final exam. Okay, so Austin says, will question 1 be a bit more straightforward than the sample? I feel like the smaller things like ensuring doubles of 3 decimal places can take more time than people would initially think. That's a great question. Yes. The question 1 will be more straightforward than the sample. Yes. I think the behavior will be substantially clearer. I can't really give you many hints than that, but Yeah, I wouldn't worry about. I get what you're saying, and my judgment is that you won't feel that with the question one we have in the final exam. Pink Omega says, will we have better tests than the sample exam for question two? Yes. Um, so I think just for clarity here, when we did this 24-hour exam last year, we didn't give students any tests. Um, because we gave them so much time and we were scaling it so aggressively and stuff like that. And from a workload perspective, that was fine. But obviously the problem with that is that we learned if you didn't give one test, students can actually go way off track in terms of they just don't even understand how to write. Like about 5% of students just absolutely wrote uncompilable code because they didn't have a reference point. Right? Fair enough. So we put the sample test in. The sample test for question two and the sample exam they were kind of written hastily to get a sample exam out because we had to kind of cobble one together this time amidst everything else. So yes, there will be better tests than for um, than for the sample exam question two. The only thing I would say though is that like with question two, like we will give you a basic test, and passing it will. The way I want you to think about question two is it's like assignment two, in the sense that assignment two is like, think of it like a Euclidean vector, and we could give you a simple test that's like create a Euclidean vector, operator multiply it by 3 so that all values go times by 3, and then check if it's equal to a different vector. That's the kind of sample we'll give you. And if you think about getting that sample test in assignment 2, it helps you understand, oh, okay, I get the gist of where this is going to go, and now I can extrapolate how all the other behavior goes, but we don't give you like an array of tests for it, because in a lot of ways, like an assignment 2 style question is focused on trying to get you to feel comfortable, interpret it. Like it's a bit more of a comprehension exercise, right? In the sense that you're trying to understand a class behavior, you're trying to understand parameters and return types and everything else and output it. So there will be a sample test that feels clear for assignment 2. But when you say, will we have better tests than the sample for question 2? If you mean better as in it feels less meaningless, then yes, is the short answer. If you mean better in terms of more coverage, then no, because that's the challenge. Like the challenge of question 2 is getting the implementation right. Is it's going to be a class, right? But it's getting the class right. And as far as we're concerned, for a question that's pretty straightforward, giving extensive tests for it is like kind of pointless. It's like might as well just give you the marks to an extent at some point. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Any other questions? Please keep posting in the chat. Looking at the time, we'll probably finish up sometime between 1 and 1:30. So just quickly again, in terms of lecture content, I would say that just to run through it all, week 1 is hard to comment much on. I think with week 1 and 2, all of this stuff isn't required for the exam specifically, though it's very helpful, if that makes sense. Like you don't need to use STL algorithms, you don't need to use iterators, but you probably need to understand containers, but it's helpful knowing. You don't have to like study it in detail. Like it's like these topics are as helpful as you need them to be to solve problems. Yes. It's probably important to understand class types. Again, I'm just trying to think through it. It's like, I guess there are some things like construction, destruction that can be relevant there, or copy assignment, but I think that comes a bit later. Just how classes work. I mean, this one's definitely kind of relevant, to be honest, but it's not going to murder you not to know all the details again. Operator overloading and exceptions are definitely important to know. Those two things you should be very comfortable with. Resource management and smart pointers. I think I said this in the other lecture. It's like, are we pretty upfront in the sense that smart pointers are good programming practice? And since we're not really giving you good programming practice, some of you might want to use smart pointers in the exam, um, you know, but if you can get away with not doing it. Resource management is definitely something you should think about. Um, you should be comfortable with that topic. Templates you should be comfortable with. Custom iterators you should be, how to put it? It's like, you need to be comfortable with the custom iterators topic, but you shouldn't be expected to implement an iterator. Like from like a custom iterator. Like there are parts of custom iterators where we talk about different types of iterators and like, what they mean and blah, blah, blah. But you shouldn't be expected to like go and write your own iterator in the final exam. Advanced templates, advanced types. Again, some of this stuff you might find useful, a tiny bit of it, but a lot of it you won't find useful. The question is, what would you find useful in the exam? And dynamic polymorphism is something you should be comfortable with for the final exam. I mean, to be honest with you, most of this is kind of like, it's either in two categories. It's like either you'll need to know this explicitly, or you'll find it useful to know this, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense, right? Like, it's like some stuff, if you don't know it, you won't be able to answer the question right. And some stuff, if you don't know it, you will be able to still answer the question right, but it might be harder, or you might have to go through more hoops, or you'll have to do more work, essentially, to get there. So the things I pointed out here as you should definitely know are worth being comfortable with, theoretically. The other ones you should just be comfortable with, like, as much as you can to help yourself. But also, to be honest with you, by this point in the course, a lot of that's already baked in. Like, STL algorithms can make you, how would you put it? STL algorithms can make your code much better, but if you don't know them, you might make mistakes with them. So, I see a lot of students using like standard swap, standard exchange, standard variant, standard this, standard that, tons and tons of stuff, and like it makes them write code really quick. But like I would not suggest that you sit down on Sunday night and say, I'm going to get more comfortable with STL algorithms so that I can do the exam faster, because if you aren't already comfortable with them by this point, it's unlikely that the faster coding abilities that they bring you will be like balanced correctly against the fact that because you have limited experience, you're likely to be a bit more hesitant using it, I hope that makes sense too, but yeah, that gives some advice. Alice says, when will we be able to see our feedback for Simon? Will we be able to? Yes. I'm aiming for Sunday night. I don't think the feedback is going to be as useful as like just getting the mark, because I know there's a bunch of people who want to kind of get a sense of what their mark is going into the exam. And I'll try and email out on Sunday night with info about the exam, and info about the marks and everything else. So I'll do that on Sunday night. Pink Omega says, will we be dealing with a lot of IO stream in question 1, like in the sample? I don't think there's much in the sample, is there? Am I crazy? Or is there? How did I leave that question in the end? I thought I changed it, but maybe I just thought about changing it. There's no IO stream for question 1. So no, you don't have to deal with IO stream. It'll be very similar to the sample exam. And Austin says, are the two questions equally weighted in marks? Yes. Now, they are. Look, I feel question 2 is easier than question 1 in the final exam, but I'm not that smart. I did COMP6771 as a student and got like a 54 in the course. I'm I'm not good with word ladder style questions. It's just not. I'm just not great like that. So I find it easier personally. Like I look at it and I think, wow, if I was doing this exam, I would definitely start with question 2 because like I'll be able to bash through that. That being said, it's like Nathaniel sat the exam and he of that hour I said he spent, I think he spent 2/3 of it on question 2. So I don't want to make broad statements about which one's harder. Like they're both equally weighted. I'm certain that most of you will find one of the questions easier than the other based on your background, your competencies, your, what you found comfortable and familiar. And it's just going to come down to whether you like HackerRank style questions or whether you like Assignment 2 style questions. That's about it. And if you're more likely to like, HackerRank leak code style questions, then you'll probably find question 1 easier. If you prefer kind of Assignment 2 style questions, you'll probably find question 2 easier. But they are equally weighted nonetheless, both of those questions. Back to Pink Omega's question about, do we have to deal with things like reading in T and double from a string? This is in reference to the calculator needing to read in a vector of strings and parsing them. I mean, yeah, that's possible. Like, yeah, I'm not saying you have to or you don't. We haven't shied away from that. We haven't said we can't do that in the final exam. Shuhouse says, if we get more than 50 marks in the 3 assignments, it means we already passed the course, right? Yes. That's correct. That's how it works. So that's kind of what I mean. Because I get this question every term. It's like if a student has 60 out of 100 in C++ before the exam, so that they've got 30% to go, and they're at 60 out of 100 already. They get like 14 out of 15 on question 1 in the final. And then in the final, they get like 0 out of 15 for question 2. Yeah, and then you go and look at their code, and you can see that like it's a non-trivial error. And they just don't understand the stuff. It's like we don't comb through and fix things for you. It's a slippery slope, and like how many marks do we deduct at that point? Like the whole purpose of the exam is for you to be able to effectively complete very contained questions. Don't, if you're in that scenario, it's like you just need to make your code work. We don't if you send me the email and you're like, if you're a high achieving student already and you did really well in question 1 and then question 2 you had a compile error and you'd done half of it but it never compiled and you're wondering if you can get partial, the answer is going to be no in that case, right? We can't give partial marks for code that doesn't compile for non-trivial reasons. It's just not, there's just no framework for that. You should definitely run your 6771 exam check. Yeah. But again, just to manage your expectations, most of you, I would guess, the average student will probably finish question 1 knowing that there's some parts of it that they don't think work, but they should be pretty okay, and they'll get most of question 2 done. That'd be my guess. But also, thankfully, if we do think the marks come out too harsh for some reason, we can just test easier or scale, whichever we want. Okay, more questions. Come on, let's do it. I'll say right now, given how kind of The fact that we've had like 8 questions so far in 30 minutes. Let's just finish up at 1 o'clock, but let's see what we got between now and then in terms of your questions. If we can wrap up earlier too if you want, but I mean, I don't know. It's like I feel like the sample exam's pretty indicative, and it's going to be less headachy than not that the sample exam's headachy, but I understand it's imperfect, right? I get that. I get when people are like, this is a little bit weird, or this is a little, like, I get that. But that's because we cobbled it together. Well, I cobbled it together, and we didn't spend hours and hours and hours combing through it. Austin says, if you've seen the auto mark so far for assignment 3, could you comment on the average performance across the course so far? I don't know, because I look at them like it's like in an Excel spreadsheet, except I can't really sum them up. Um, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. Typically, we find though that it's just in assignment 3 the spread is more distributed. So in assignment 2 you kind of have this like in assignment 1 as well, like the assignment 1 marks, if you kind of were to go here and it's like, this is like the distribution of students, and this is like, this is like 15 out of, or like 100%, right? 100%. It's like the marks, is that how it works? Wait, I don't know. It's like 0 and 100% here or whatever. It's like, and this is like the number of students. You see, it's like, it kind of does like, it always flatlines for some people who can't get anything. And then it like goes up like that. And then it tapers off like slowly towards 100. Assignment 2 is relatively similar, except you get a slightly more tapered thing, because this is people who are just like getting some parts right and not other parts right, whereas like this is people getting at least 95% of it right. Typically what we see with assignment 3 is that it's actually just like more like that, or I guess more accurately it's probably more like that, is you just kind of have, because it's just more complex and there's more components to it, people tend to just miss things. They get Euclidean norms wrong. Like there was about 5 or 6 students who just put the Euclidean norm in the wrong namespace, for instance. And, there was other people who did a similar thing. So, yeah, that was basically the gist of it. I don't have numbers for you off the top of my head. It's hard to tell because we're still running through some plagiarism checking. We're still, running through adjustments and late submissions and everything. The sample exam spec is kind of confusing. I mean, I wouldn't call the spec confusing. I'd say that there are parts of the spec that could definitely be clarified better. For asking for help during the exam, it says to ask privately. If there are questions that apply broadly, will they be publicly posted? Yeah, of course. They'll be publicly emailed to everyone. So basically, at the start of the exam time, we will post on WebCMS3 and email you and post on a forum giving you instructions. Well, I mean, the instructions will be clear, like would give you the exam spec. It's not that complicated. I'll also be emailing you a copy of the exam spec, because you never know what happens with GitLab. Sometimes GitLab can go down. It's gone down every term I've taught with GitLab. Thank you, CSE, so far. But it does seem to be getting less bad every term, so maybe they're adapting to it. I'm not sure. But yeah, so it'll be on all mediums. You'll find it pretty easily. And yes, you asked for help. My advice to people though is please don't email, like, don't, how to put it, don't email me unless it's like a critical problem. Like, if you're like, oh, my computer just caught on fire, I can't do the exam anymore, email me that, sure, because if I reply to it in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour or 2 hours, nothing changes, right? Like, you still can't do the exam. You're still going to have to apply for a SUP. But I have students every single term, they email me like, I can't figure this out or whatever. And it's like, we monitor the forum because it's the only real scalable way to deal with, like, when I say we, I mean probably just me, to be honest. Maybe another tutor, depending on how, um, yeah, depending on how we go. But yes, everything will be publicly posted. Occasionally, I unmark um, occasionally if someone asks a really good question that, like, um, I think everyone should know, but it's not like literally critical, I'll unprivate it and pin it up the top. Um, uh, Pink Omega says, did VLab go down during the 2521 exam? No, the 2521 exam went fine. The only problem was that we have these email aliases in the CSE that allow me to email all of you, but and I've been using them for 2 years now, but apparently during that exam, the emails were like rolled out or buffered or some real crap. It was like, it like went out to like a few hundred students instantly, and then the rest of the students are like rolled out too slowly. It was really weird. So that's why we're not going to just... Normally we rely on email because um, the most robust thing at UNSW is the Microsoft email exchanges, right? Like, Microsoft, one of the biggest companies in the world, manages the email servers. So the chances that you can log in and get your email during the exam is nearly guaranteed, as opposed to VLab and WebCMS3 and the CSE servers and GitLab, which are all hosted by essentially, half a dozen people working for CSE. So, but the problem wasn't actually the email servers. It was CSE has a mailing alias that, like, when I email all of you, it goes through a CSE black box, and then that goes out to Microsoft servers, basically. So that was the problem, ironically. But that won't be a problem for us. If everyone's submitting at the end of the 3 hours and trying to push is really slow, will it take the time when you commit rather than pushing? That's correct. So the time that appears on GitLab is your commit time, not your push time. So if you can't push to the exam, like if you're getting timeout errors and stuff, what I'd ask from you is that you, like, I'll just be really clear. It's like, so let's say it's 4:58 and you're trying to push, and GitLab is having a tantrum and not letting you push. Okay, so what do? Well, take a screenshot of you trying to push at 4:58. Just hit screenshot on your computer, save it somewhere, just do that. And then just try and push every, like, 3 minutes or something like that. Generally speaking, as long as you push it within 10 or 15 minutes of the end of the exam, I'm mostly going to be okay. But the more important thing here is, like, communicate with me in terms of like a typical thing I'd hope a student does is it's 4:58, you try to push, you're all done, and you just have to push. It's not working. Take a screenshot, go post on the forum. If in 6 minutes you get it to push, post on your forum post again and say I solved it. And I'll be like, great. And if it's like, I'll confirm for you if I'm happy with the timing and stuff, but it's like, if it's 4 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever, it's like, that's fine. Don't email me a zip of your code. Just please don't do that. Just keep trying to push and keep post. Like, if you need help, post on the forum. The chances are too that, like, if you are having problems, nearly everyone else is. So it's like, if it's 4:58 and you can't push, like, just give it a couple of minutes. Give it 3 or 4 minutes. Like, it's really hard to... I generally have a really simple attitude, which is like, the likelihood that someone is going to have the competency to manipulate Git hashes and Git timestamps after the exam is done, after they've modified their... Like, what are the odds that after 5 p.m. you're going to modify your code, which can take minutes to test depending on, like, the compilation environment you're in, and then commit that while trying to hack the history and then push that, is like, great. Like, I just don't think it happens, right? So generally speaking, what we do is we will cut your access to your we will cut your access to your GitLab repo around a couple minutes past 5, or if there are GitLab pushing issues at some logical moment after that. Typically like 5:10 or 5:12 or 5:14 or some time where we start to see that everyone's pushing now, right? But I've said this in the revision lecture, in the exam lecture. It's like, just don't do that thing that student did and like try and push, it didn't push, and then go and have a nap for 6 hours and then email me. Just do not do that. As long as you don't have a nap before you solve your problem, you'll be okay. What happens if Corelli crashes during the exam? I don't know, is the short answer. We will see. We didn't have issues with it last year at all. Typically, I rarely see things in CSE get worse, but you never know. So, um, but yeah, it's like if there's systemic problems, like if GitLab crashed and didn't come back on for an hour, then like we just have to wait till it comes back and then let everyone push, right? Um, or in that case, like, I might email you all to send a zip of your stuff. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, right? Like, if something awful happened, the most important thing you can do is check your email. That is the only thing you need to worry about, because in your email, I will email you and I'll say something like, "Hi, GitLab appears to be down. You all need to send me a zip file." Oh God. You all need to send me a zip file of your code in the next 20 minutes. Just for like, so just check your email, that like they'll figure it out. Like, I'm pretty lenient with this stuff. It's imperfect too, I was talking to a tutor yesterday who was like, "Oh, well, what happens if like there's GitLab problems and you have to give everyone an extra 5 minutes, but you know, someone's finished the exam. They finished at 3. They've got nothing to do, and someone else like quickly like touches up their code and like just quickly fixes a couple things, and they have an extra few minutes. It's like, isn't that unfair?" And it's like, my philosophy with this, and I always get worried sharing opinions on publicly recorded lectures, but it's just like, open book exams are fundamentally unfair, which is why I don't like them being weighted very much. Again, that's why my exams I try and keep smaller, because the whole thing's unfair. It's unfair that some people here, like, I've never set up the CMake environment locally because I struggle with some of that stuff sometimes. I struggle with solving all these weird debugging problems, right? So I'd be doing my exam either on VLab or via VS Code SSH, which is pretty good. Some people have bigger screens where they can see more code at the same time. Some people have construction outside of their house, or loud neighbors. Like, it's this pretty unfair environment. So when you're like, "Oh, someone got a few more minutes than me," it's like, effectively a lot of people in this exam are going to have had an effective few more minutes than you and an effective less few minutes than you, depending on their own circumstances. Our priority is not to like make everything totally fair, because that's a misnomer. That just doesn't exist for these kinds of exams. Our priority is to make sure nothing is ludicrous, right? Like, if someone loses half an hour because a toilet exploded in their house, or something like that, like, we just need to make sure that anytime something kind of falls out of the noise margin of what is just naturally a little unfair, is like, that's when we can take control of it and help out. Please always communicate to your issues. I'm not telling you things that are like, I'm telling you things that are written down already, but it's like, people just keep forgetting them. It's like, I had a student yesterday who emailed me like 2 minutes before the exam was done and says, "Hi, my internet's been really bad throughout the exam. Can I have an extra hour?" And it's like, no, you can't. And it's not even because I don't want to give it to you. It's because, like, if you told me like 10 minutes into the exam that your internet's cooked, I would have helped you solve it. And if we couldn't solve it after 10 minutes, I would have said, "Sit us up." But if you've sat the whole exam, it's like, we can't even really give you a sup sometimes. It's sometimes not even appropriate. Because you've kind of raised an issue once it's done, and you get into that category of like, maybe they just wanted to try and do the exam. I'm not saying this is true, but it's like, it's possible that someone could want to try and do the exam, and then once they realize they didn't do very well at it, then they ask for the sup, and that's the policies UNSW tries to prevent. Like that's the policy that UNSW that is what UNSW is trying to prevent with their policies. Um, Austin says, "What happened to the student that took a nap?" I don't remember. They definitely didn't get any marks for the final exam. I can't remember if they did a sup or not. I have a feeling they might have been might have been their final term, and we gave them a sup. UNSW is very lenient to students in their final term if they just fail a course. They're not trying to keep people around and drag their life on just for a couple of marks. So, how do you think VTuber tutors are the future? Or do I think VTuber tutors? I don't know what a VTuber tutor is. It's a VTuber. Oh yes, sure. I understand now. Um, I I guess I don't know. It's hard to tell. There's like a really fine line between I don't know. I don't have any feelings on that matter. I mean, I mean, sorry, I just Googled that on another screen in case I got ligmid again, but it's like, that you're referring to this, right? Which I assume is in relation to the UNSW discussion posts and stuff. Um, like this stuff, I assume is kind of what you're getting at. Um, I don't know. I think there's like I think like all these things, it's always like a healthy conversation. I mean I've already actually asked people about this, and I get some people will say to me like, oh well, it's awesome, like it's great, people get to like not have to um, share themselves, like they can hide behind an avatar, and that makes them more comfortable and confident, like we already control how we look and how we convey ourselves already, like it's just another version of that. And I get other people that are like, doesn't that take away from like some of the like the more human elements of like learning and interacting and stuff, and make the world a little too virtual? And I think both of those kinds of comments make some sense. It's like the old thing about, is virtual reality good or bad? um like if someone's in VR all day, is that good or bad? It's like, well, it's good in the sense that they can do all these crazy things. It's bad in the sense that, well, people who argue it's bad will say that it's taking you away from like more fundamental parts of the human experience. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's the same debate we have for tons of things, which is just your standard, we're always trying to do new and innovative things in life, and sometimes we get them really right by trying to change how we go, and sometimes, oh God, and sometimes we get them wrong. Like, we've learned that social media is not good, right? Like, that was an experiment, timelines and Instagram and stuff, and now we're seeing the negative effects of it, and everyone's like, actually, maybe we did something here that's a little not good for people. And then there's lots of other things that we've pushed the boundaries of, which have been great. Um, you know, Same-sex marriage, everything like that. You know what I mean? Like all these conversations would start with people saying, let's do something differently. And there's a crowd that says everything in the past is bad. And there's a crowd that says everything in the past is good. And then they fight for a while, and you just got to respect each other and listen. That's the best part, because then you kind of, there's an old Arnold Schwarzenegger quote that I love, which, because Arnold Schwarzenegger's he's the movie actor who turned into a politician, and he was a Republican, which is like a right wing. Well, not yeah, it's like right wing governor of California, but California is like a pretty progressive state, and so he was kind of like this weird mix where I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger's policies are probably like too right wing for left wing people, and probably too left wing for right wing people. Because I think he considered himself like quite like a centrist politician that really sat in the middle. And he used to have this quote, I don't remember what it was, but he had it in as a thick German accent, basically trying to describe that if you're driving down a highway and you try and drive too far onto the left of the road or the right of the road, you're going to drive on the gravel and pop your tires and crash. And it's important to drive down the center. And I was like, it's a funny quote. That wasn't even funny describing it, but it was interesting thinking of. Anyway, this is going way off a tangent, but at least I got to share some things that are fun. Short story is, yeah, I don't know. Great, another exam question. Thank you. We've got 4 more minutes to kill, So if you have more exam questions, can you please... Yes, thank you, finally. So, Michaels, any hot tips for doing the exam? Um, Start with question 2, because I think the breadth questions, um, you will find that you will consume a lot of time compiling. So I think what's kind of good is if you can do question 2, and every time you're compiling, maybe think a little more about question 1, um, if that makes sense. Because question 1 will already compile. Like, if we ran your question 1 right now, it would compile against all the tests we run because it's a simple black box question. It's just that you would get all the answers wrong. It's like the word ladder thing. It's really easy to make it compile. So I think my hot tip would be factor in how you feel about... factor in how long it takes you to do question 2 in terms of compilation. So that'd be probably the main thing I can think about. The only other hot tips are usual is like don't get your head totally lost in a deep topic. Like don't just waste an hour on this like tiny bit of the like I said this to my 2521 students. It's like you don't get marks for being a hero, and the compiler doesn't care about... Like, you know this. It's like you will feel when you aren't going to get something because it's just not as easy as you expect. And rarely just adding layers of complexity and if statements are not going to get you there. So focus on the low-hanging fruit always and don't be a hero. For question 1 in the sample, I kind of felt like we have to use standard variant, which we were never taught. Will this kind of situation be in the exam? I don't remember, but there were lots of students that didn't use standard variant to solve that problem. But there are always going to be things we didn't teach that might make the exam easier. That could happen. So I don't think that's a massive concern. When will the SUP exam info be announced? I don't know. I actually don't control any of that. I randomly get an email sometime. I don't even know when. And they say, here's your SUP exam time. Here's your list of students. Good luck. That's pretty much what happened. So I don't know. I'm sad. Sorry. Michael says, will there be any really large test cases to pseudocode check time? Will there be any really large test cases to pseudo check time complexity? No, there's no time complexity on this exam. Even if you wrote some really horrific solutions, given the scale of... You have reminded me though, I do need to add a time constraint to the exam, but it's like your test can only run for 5 seconds or something. But like the kinds of questions, it's just they're not... Like the thing to remember about word ladder, right, is word ladder is an exponential problem, right? Like it's an unbounded algorithmic problem. So you're brute forcing a word ladder solve. Pretty sure. Yeah, you're brute forcing the word ladder. That's why there's a time complexity component. I mean, any code that you aren't brute forcing will be completed in a relatively trivial amount of time for a computer. So I'll put one in for formality's sake, so that if you have like a while loop that never ends and we kill your process, that you don't email me saying, oh, I didn't know that was only going to be allowed a minute to run. But it won't mean anything to anyone of any real substance. Austin says, any difference between using debug and release mode for the exam? Nope. We'll probably be marking with debug code, just so we can get more detail. But the main reason we wanted you using release mode for assignment 1 was because when you compile with debugging symbols, it runs a lot slower. So it was mainly for performance reasons. So no, I would just use whatever, because it won't really... I mean, I would use debug, because then you'll get the debugging info. For question 2 and maybe question 1, will there be a mark breakdown for subparts? Yeah, yes. So question one, there won't be a mark. There'll be a very broad mark breakdown. Um, like I'll give you some analogies. So question one mark breakdown will be kind of like the word ladder question if we said you get 50% of your marks from simple word ladders and you get 50% of your marks from complex word ladders. Um, it would be hard for us to even give a this is what a complex word ladder is because we'd have to define it somehow, and it's like it's really just trying to say like if you can get it working, um, then you'll be sweet. Um, and then the other half of the marks are for like the ones that are just blowouts or duplicates or whatever. But I don't think question one will have a lot of specificity, but that's okay because it's just the nature of the question. Question two, there will be a mark breakdown that's quite similar to assignment three in the sense that we'll say, 20% of your marks will kind of come here, 20% will kind of come there. Yep. And I just want to stress to students again, it's like the reason we could literally give marks for every function, though the downside of that is that it removes our ability to test like to do any integration testing between functions, and it also means that um, if you all get really bad marks or worse marks than we want, we can't just tweak the test to bump you up. Because sometimes the way we deal with things is like, if we notice that like everyone struggled with a certain section, then sometimes we'll just test less, so that your marks end up not being too low. Um, could you report how the other tutors do the exam when they completed it? I don't know if that I don't think I'll probably comment on that too much. I just don't think it's useful. I think at best it's useless and at worst it's like distracting or gives a red herring. I only mentioned the Nathaniel thing just to give you all some assurance that um, I was just trying to give you something concrete that's like this exam won't be crushingly hard. Um, that isn't just me telling you that, because I know me telling you that a bunch of you are like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure, but like, yeah, I was like, no, no, someone's actually sat it, and yeah, they're quite smart, but they bash through it. Um, I think maybe something else I'd flag is that there will be a subset of you in this course, typically not the higher mark students, who just really struggle with question one. Um, and that's okay if that's you. This happens sometimes, like I've done exams in my life where I've gotten 100%. I've done exams where I've gotten 12%. I'm not saying it's going to be that low, but my point is that I know there's students in here who, if I gave you a word ladder style question, nothing as complex as word ladder, but a word ladder style question or a stack calculator style question, that even in 90 minutes, you're just you're just not someone who feels comfortable solving these problems in any smallish amount of time. Like you're the kind of person who needs to look at this for a couple of days and really think about it. And there will be some people like that who do probably feel a little bit hurt by this, but um, that's exams, right? We ask you questions. Some of you do some of you don't. But I would still recommend people start with question two. That's my advice, though. That's not a requirement. How's everyone doing? Also, is everyone well? Is everyone happy and healthy? And how are they feeling about the exam? Anything else? Let's do the last few questions and then we'll wrap up. I think just while I'm waiting for more questions, the only other comment I just wanted to make about the VTuber stuff, which we looked at before, is that I think one thing that's good and one thing that universities shouldn't shy away from is like just trying out new things all the time. And I think anytime someone tries out anything new, you should be as supportive as you can be, because I think it's great. Like, I mean, there's people like Daniel Mansfield and stuff who I think Daniel Mansfield. Yeah, I guess, but I got him mistaken with the guy from Mech. I can't remember his name. I remember his hair, but I don't remember his name. He's the Mech guy. There's like the young Mech guy that does a lot of like online teaching stuff. I think it's great when anyone tries to do anything. And Richard Buckland used to do this a lot. So I think it's like if your tutor ever tries to do anything interesting, and by that I mean like we've seen this when we were in person, right? Tutors used to be like, "Yeah, David Kellerman, thank you." Tutors used to be like, "We're going to go and have a class out on the grass today." It's like it's easy to like roll your eyes at things sometimes, but it's like just be like, "Cool, let's give it a go." And see how it goes, and often it'll be a cool idea, and if something is something you don't like, then you just share it with someone, and then they learn. There's lots of things I try with students, um, and sometimes it's like, yeah, am I going to try out VTubing in lectures? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. I mean, the main appeal as I see it, and I might be wrong, is it's it's hard to be on camera. We had a big debate about this in 1531 where we gave bonus marks for cameras being on, and we talked about should we make the marks compulsory, and it's like um, particularly being like a young woman who's studying, it's like in person, if someone's being a creeper, you can kind of tell, right? Like if you're sitting in a classroom, this isn't just women, but I think it happens more, is like if you're sitting in a classroom and there's like a weird person kind of being a bit creepy staring at you, you can see it because they're staring at you. Or you turn and you see them, but on camera it's really hard. You don't know what people are screenshotting, you don't know who's looking at you, you don't know what type of people, and I very sympathetic to the degree of anxiety that brings people, because being on camera is not the same as being in person. Um, so when people are like, oh, I don't feel safe being on a webcam in my bedroom as opposed to teaching in front of a class, it's like that makes sense to me at least. Like that sounds scarier. So I think it's great. I think it's a cool idea to explore for people, particularly who struggle with that kind of anxiety around, potentially feeling creeped on, or persecuted, or something similar. Like, if someone takes a photo of you in person, you're like, you'd be like, "Yo, Michael, why did you just pull your phone out and take a photo of me? That's really weird." Whereas like, people take screenshots of me all the time, and it's like most of the time it's funny. Occasionally you're like, "Oh, that's so annoying," because you have no control over it. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking about VTubing. God, I feel like you guys are helping me stay hip. Okay, any last questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Give you like 15 more seconds. Any last questions? Post them all now, because I won't ask again if there's any last questions. Oh yeah, good luck with the exam, everyone. I'll be there on Monday afternoon. I'll be there on the forum and stuff. I hope by now you know me enough to know that I have enough common sense with things to, yeah. So don't stress. Just feel prepared. If you're someone who's done the first 3 assignments, actually let me give my last comment. If you are someone who's done 3 assignments and you've done relatively okay at them, you're probably pretty ready. My only advice to you is probably study the topics that we didn't go into excessive depth with in the course, in terms of practicality, and maybe just play around on some coding websites for question 1. The questions we're asking are not like aggressive, level 10 leak code style questions. But it's assignment 1 style questions. We don't have a lot of that in the course, I guess. So, yes, it is open book. Yeah, it's open book. You can use the internet but not talk to anyone. Oh, and just last reminder, again, I've said this before, but it's like you can copy code from your own assignments. You can copy code from the lectures. You can copy code from the lab solutions. You can't copy code from the internet. don't copy code from the internet at all. Because we'll pick up on it instantly. If you're considering copying code from the internet, someone else has found that code and they are looking at copying it too. And if that happens, you're all going to get 0 for the exam and probably fail the course, right? So don't do that. Don't copy code. And I get students ask me, like, I found this code on the internet. How much of it can I use? I'll give you my blanket answer now. The most formal, appropriate answer I can say is if you find code on the internet that you think helps you solve your problem, and it's like 10, 20 lines of code, it's like, look at it, stare at it, study it for like a minute or two, close the tab, and then go and implement it. Because just doing that and having that separation will mean that you don't, you just won't produce it the same way. Like, you'll understand the general approach and you'll write it the same way, which will mean that you've actually created something yourself. But if you copy and paste it and try and cut stuff out and reverse engineer it, I guarantee you the plagiarism checker will come and punch you in the face and you'll get 0. So yes, to answer that question, I found code on the internet that's kind of useful. It's like, well, look at it. Sure. It'll probably tell you how to solve something, but don't copy and paste it and reverse engineer it. Don't copy any of it. I mean, obviously you can copy a line of code, but you know what I mean? Like, don't copy word ladder code or something like that. How do we study inheritance and stuff extensively? Look, you do need to be familiar with the inheritance stuff, though. What I would say is that just the tute questions we have, the lecture stuff we have, if you're familiar with that and the examples make sense, you should be okay. You don't have to. There's nothing. There could be some stuff in the exam that touches on a lot of inheritance stuff, but it wouldn't be extensive at all, just because we haven't dealt with it extensively in the course. Diamu, it says, what about one line off the internet, like an example usage of a standard algo? Yeah, a line's fine. I mean, you just have to be able to reasonably justify that this is not a unique thing that no one else does except for this web page here. And yeah, like if you find a bubble sort on the internet and you copy and paste it, you'd probably get picked up by a plagiarism checker if all of you did it. But it's like your response to that is, well, how else do you solve a bubble sort? Everyone does it the same way. This is what I've seen in, like, everyone does it literally the same way. Whereas, like, if you have code that's found elsewhere on the internet that's more complex and you say everyone does it the same way, it's like, well, no, one person does it the same way, and it's just a fact that people don't write the same code. It's like handwriting. Well, it's not quite like handwriting, but yeah, just don't copy and paste chunks of code. Don't be afraid to copy a line of code. So, like, you don't want to copy a conceptual solution, is maybe how I would phrase it to you. Like, you don't want to have a problem and then find a piece of code that solves it with a couple of for loops and if statements and stuff, and then be like, there's the conceptual solution. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to simplify it, and then I'm going to cut it down and make it my own. Because when most people say they want to simplify the code, nearly always that means they want to rename the variables, cut out a few extra lines, and again, I can guarantee you that plagiarism checkers will find that stuff, and they will, yeah, they will find you. Okay, well, it's 1:15. Let's wrap up. Thank you again for the wonderful term. I know we already kind of said goodbye to everyone, but this is the first. This is like one of the longest courses I have a relationship with, so it's always great to. I think it's the first time I taught the whole course as well, so which is a bit of a downside for everyone, but it's been nice chatting again, and hopefully I'll see you around. Please add me on LinkedIn and all of that. Like, I would say Facebook, but apparently no one uses Facebook anymore, and it's less appropriate than LinkedIn. You can all add me on LinkedIn, and I can just accept you, and you can always reach out there and stuff. So, yeah, and that's it. Have a good holiday. Look after yourselves with COVID and all of that. Oh, and last thing, just a reminder, I'll send a notice out about it, but I have my little, like, casual drop-in friendly chat sometime I don't remember where I did it on the calendar. Oh, it's next Thursday, but I'll send an email out about that. If you just want to come along and have a chat to me about anything to do with educational courses or anything really. Think of it like a think of it like a, just an open-ended. I'd probably just do a Zoom call. But yeah, anyway, I'll see you later. Have a great term. Good luck for your exam. See you all sometime.